hi everyone.
Hello.
So yeah, lovely to be here. To see everybody.
Good morning.
We're here normally because we're going to do some exciting sustainability stuff with the club and launching a new product in the shop. So Lydia invited us to talk down, so I'm Trevi, and we want to help with the product. But because we are doing the scheme and the sort of the environmental work with the Federation, and we thought it's a nice opportunity for David to come down as well. Perhaps some of you don't interact much with the Federation because it's more of a clubs organisation. So David's going to do a little bit of a chat about who the Federation are, what they do for clubs such as RIC, then why they wanted a green scheme, and then I'll take over and just talk you through a little bit on what it's about. So, over to you, David. Who are the FBHVC? What are their goals? There you go, TV.
Such a professional.
I know. We're like the Anton Deck of classic.
So I think, good morning everyone, opportunity to come back to the Hunt House. Some of you, particularly Clive, will know that I was the trustee of the Sir Henry Royce Memorial Foundation a few years ago. So nice to be back in the building, but today representing the Federation. So the Federation of British Historic Vehicle Clubs goes back to 1988 when we were incorporated, and taking a slight pun, and I see you use my word, a slight pun there, our roots actually go back far further than that. And people very often say to us, Federation of British Historic Vehicle Clubs. That's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? Would you rather us be called the Historic Vehicle Clubs Joint Committee? No. So we did actually make a change in '88. But the protection of historic vehicles actually does go back to the 60s and even before that. Our start point was actually through Lord Montague of Bewley and John right at the beginning, and then very ably taken over by Edward, who was our president for 30 years, until he passed. And of course Rafe is now involved as well. The important thing is that we truly represent all historic vehicles. And if you actually look at data, the data will show you that there is 1.5 million historic vehicles actually on the DVLA database. So that's credible, recorded, and the bit that people don't realise is that of those 1.5 million historic vehicles, only 50.3% are actually cars. Yes, so that's always a good one to get the attention of people in terms of saying, oh, so what are all the rest then? And so 50.3% are cars. There's about 25% are motorcycles. Believe it or not, 10% are agricultural vehicles, primarily tractors, but combine harvesters and all manner of other stuff. And then on top of that, we've got buses and coaches, we've got lorries and vans, we've got military vehicles, and we have steam vehicles.
You always mention the military vehicles when you're talking to government, don't you? You always rely on those. There's loads of tanks in the Federation.
Yeah. Well, that's right. And actually, if you look at the Military Vehicle Preservation Society, of course, they've got their big event coming up next month with the D-Day celebrations and taking lots of vehicles to France. So each of these segments is important in its own right. So 1.5 million vehicles, as I say, that's on DVLA database, so that's kosher, as it were. Those 1.5 million vehicles are actually owned by just under 700,000 people. So typically, you know, an enthusiast would have 2 point something vehicles. The motorcycle guys have got far more, basically because you can squidge more motorcycles in a building than you can a car. So quite a lot of motorcycles. And agricultural vehicles is quite interesting, because if they're operating on a farm, they don't actually need to be road registered. So there's probably double the number of agricultural vehicles than actually on the database. All of that builds to 250,000 enthusiasts. And again, that's quantifiable because every club, like RREC, when you join each year, you tell us how many members you've got, and that goes on a massive spreadsheet, and that is data accessible, and is about 221,000, I think, the latest number. And then on top of that, we've got museums. And museums are coming.
Hello. Sorry, I was sneaking quietly.
That's all right. Yeah, I blew that.
Well, I'll grab a coffee with you.
So about 221,000 individual members of clubs. But then on top of that, we also look after museums. We've got formally 50 museum members. So that includes things like National Motor Museum, British Motor Museum, but equally it includes quite small museums as well. And what museums, there's quite a trend actually just at the moment for museums to promote themselves as an entity. So if you go to the British Motor Museum, I think it's on a Tuesday every month, they have a big event, and they do tea and cakes for people, and guest speakers and whatever. So by the time you total all of that, we've got individual supporters, and we've also got trade supporters. That's where you get to your 250,000. 6 elements. Tom's been creative here. I haven't seen that bullet before, so.
Formatting type of gap.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's no problem. I've been, just to digress, Tom's put all this together this week because some of the people who were here earlier know that I was in Westminster Abbey on Wednesday for the memorial service for Sterling Moss. And I was with Secretary of State for Transport all of yesterday morning, so I've not had a lot of time this week, so Tom's been creative. I think the important thing with this 6 elements bullet point is to say that when the Federation started out, so in 1988, our focus was on legislation. And it's interesting, if you look at the minutes of very early meetings, most of our meetings were actually held in Whitehall. And you'd find Cabinet Office number so-and-so, which was where the meeting was held. So that's how we sort of started out. And the legislation was and is still incredibly important. If you look, I've got a team of about 26 people, and 12 of them actually sit on the legislation committee. So that's still incredibly important. Led by a practicing barrister, a guy called Lindsay Irvine, who retired from the Royal Air Force as head of the legal branch of the Royal Air Force about 2 or 3 years ago. I actually recruited him in the middle of the COVID stuff. So that's terribly important. Research is important because if I'm in Westminster, as I am 2 or 3 times a month, data is important to government. They want to know that what we're saying is substantiated by fact. And as a result of that, our research, we run programs every 5 years. And I'm sure as club members, some of you will have participated in the research we do, because the last piece of research we did, we had 15,000 inputs from club members. And that's important because we want you to tell us what you're doing with your cards. We have connections with FIVA, which is the global governing body. So if you imagine us sitting as the umbrella organisation over 500 clubs in the UK, FIVA sits as the umbrella above us, maintaining that international theme. Heritage, very important. Heritage growing in importance, and this is something that I know Andy Bye, one of my directors, has been talking to Lydia about, and you know, from my past of coming in this building, I know how much you have in terms of archive upstairs, and I think there's now a recognition that people tended to get archive and you'd think, oh God, what do we do with it? You know, it's valuable, we've got to look after it. You know, I know the fire protection systems that you've got in this building are very, very important. But now there is awful lot of focus on heritage and how you can promote the material you've got for the interest of the members, the public at large. So that's something else that we're working on. Culture, very important part of it all. And then trade and skills. One of the things I was at Vista Heritage yesterday with the minister, one of the reasons I was there was that when the minister actually went on a tour of Vista Heritage, he saw the apprentice training school. We've actually have 200 people who've either been through or are currently studying apprenticeships on heritage engineering. And part of the reason I was there, I launched our apprenticeship program actually 10 years ago at Vista, and part of me being there was to talk to the minister about what we've done. Technical support and events, which of course, so we tend not to organise many events. We do Drive It Day and Ride It Day because that ties back to the culture piece and the heritage piece, and the fact that, you know, Drive It Day basically celebrates the 1,000-mile trial in 1900, when the viability of this newfangled device, the horseless carriage, was being proven. And over 15 days, there were 63 motorists actually drove from London to Edinburgh and back. And you know, bear in mind, you couldn't pop into a Shell filling station to pop up when you needed some fuel, because most petroleum spirit was sold either by chemists or ironmongers in 2-gallon containers. So quite a logistical nightmare. So that's really the past. Okay. Thank you, Tom. So what about the future? Well, we feel that in the 21st century, we need to be far more dynamic. We need to be far more proactive rather than reactive. And that's why the Federation is doing lots of new things. We're still doing the apprenticeship programme, as we've talked about. But we launched a charity scheme 4 years ago, and we're on the final year of a contract with NSPCC, where Drive It Day actually benefits the Childline charity. And we have a massive amount of support from NSPCC in that activity. And you know, typically we're raising about £130,000 for Childline. If you consider, that might sound quite a lot of money, but when someone tells you, and I checked this number with NSPCC recently, it actually costs £35,000 a day to keep the Childline charity running for 24 hours, which is massive. And I've sat in their call centre and listened into the calls. And the Childline, they've become very digital, as you would expect. So they tend to get most of their inquiries either on the telephone or on a device of some sort. But £35,000 every single day, which is frightening. Absolutely frightening. We've touched on archiving our past, and that's not just because I know here there's a massive amount of engineering, drawings, factory build records, And that's important to your owners because they want to be able, you know, to find out how their car was specified originally and built and who the owners were. But archiving is a far bigger opportunity in terms of promoting the Rolls-Royce brand to people and creating that level of interest. And it might be, you know, film stars who had passion for the mark, all manner of other things. But archiving is incredibly important. And then we recognised we needed to pursue the sustainability agenda. We knew that we had to recognise the carbon that our vehicles generate, albeit quite small. We're way past generating carbon through the manufacture of vehicles. It's the use of them, taking them to events, coming here today, that sort of thing. But we needed to actually create a program. And quite a lot of people came to the Federation and said, well, the Federation's credible, the Federation is trustworthy. If we're going to look for a scheme to carbon balance our activities, then we'd like something that has passed due diligence tests with the Federation. And I used to work for a global corporate, so I've done the due diligence thing. But honestly, due diligence on planting trees is a whole different world. I spent 18 months tromping around fields in Yorkshire or wherever, where a very enthusiastic person sort of said, would you like to plant a tree? You know, and then you've done your bit for the future. But it took 18 months to work our way through the due diligence process. And partway along that journey, we met Tom. And people sometimes say to us, well, why don't you just go straight to a tree planter? And it's not that simple. I can assure anyone who asks the question, you have to have an intermediary between us as paying some money to say, let's plant some trees, and actually getting those trees in the ground and meeting all of the various compliance requirements. And Tom has a relationship with a company called Forest Carbon. They do all that techie stuff.
They're the green fingers.
but Tom is our intermediary in terms of, you know, we ensure that all the money that's lodged with the Federation is actually spent on trees. But then the bit in the middle is what you do.
It is indeed. Is that you nicely teeing me up?
And yes, I'm glad you got the message.
We haven't even rehearsed, guys. I'm going to stop. Yeah, very good.
I'm going to sit down there
so you can heckle in comfort.
and drink my water and let you talk to these good people.
We'll do some questions at the end, so if you've got some Federation-related questions, ask those to David at the end. Every question doesn't have to be about trees. So yeah, but thank you very much.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Alright, so yeah, I think you've teed that up nicely. So Federation will go through their due diligence process, you look at different schemes.
Yeah.
We were in the process of launching Treevee, we got in touch and said, oh, we'd love to work together, and hence we're all here today. But before we cover sort of what we do for the Federation, what we do for the clubs that are members of the Federation, I'll just talk you through who Trevi are and sort of how the carbon balancing process works, making use of trees, just so you understand, as David says, sort of what we do and then what Forest Carboners, the tree planters, do. So, who are Trevi? There's me, very good. There's my wife, there's our classic car Myrtle, and then you won't believe this, there's my mother-in-law, who we're in business with. So we're a family company, so Trevi, family company we launched, we sort of had the idea during lockdown. We launched 2020, 2021, we started working with the Federation autumn 2021. So we, like quite a few people probably during lockdown, we only needed one car, we had some spare money, we thought we've always wanted a classic, let's get a classic. We love the Morris Miners, great first classic to learn our way around. We got Myrtle, but we felt a little bit guilty on, should we updated the normal car to be EV, good for the planet. You know what, we'll carbon offset Myrtle. It sounded very simple, wasn't that simple to do. You can sort of carbon balance your whole life and how many hours of Netflix do you watch, how many times do you boil the kettle, how many showers do you have a day. But we found it should be very simple to go, I drive this many miles, therefore the emission's this, please tackle it. Wasn't a simple way to do that, so we launched Trevi. And as David says, there's lots of people out there planting trees, there's lots of forests, but it is very hard because a lot of, you know, you approach some, say, Woodland Trust or something like that, we want to help balance classic vehicles, and they go, oh no, emissions, cars, horrible things, we don't want to do work with you.
Electric.
Exactly, yeah. And then there's others that go, cool, yeah, plant a tree, but what does a tree actually signify? How many miles does that equate to? How much carbon is that? Because we needed a verifiable scheme, we needed to be able to say, well, we know you've driven this many miles, it's this many tonnes of carbon, and that has been dealt with. And just throwing a few trees up, as nice as they are, sort of along the verges of a motorway, that doesn't count. So we did the due diligence ourselves on Forest Carbon and found a tree planting partner that worked. So that was sort of where Trevi kind of came from, really. We got our own classic, we wanted to make it green, we thought others might want to as well. Thought that was a really nice thing for the community. Perhaps we're not under that pressure at the minute to be green as a big community, but that time will come in 5 or 10 years when our cars really stick out like sore thumbs on the road. So let's get ahead of the game, which I think is where the Federation were coming from. Let's do something now that when we're criticised in 10 years, we can go, oh, for the last 10 years we've been planting trees. So that's who Trevi are. As I say, we're a nice family business. We're based in the Midlands, which is obviously great because it's sort of the heart of a lot of where the museums and car manufacturing were. So that's us. And then what do we do? So, carbon balancing, David. You've clearly spent so much time with me because you used the right terminology. So that is good to see. I was taking notes. So carbon balancing. So what is carbon balancing? We've got a climate crisis, global temperatures are rising, and a lot of that is caused by carbon in the atmosphere acting like loft insulation. It's warming up the global temperature, that's causing natural disasters, that's causing then knock-on social, economic issues and things like that. So we basically need to get that carbon back out of the atmosphere. And there's lots of different ways to do that. So you sometimes see in the news as these big sort of fans that are being built that suck air in and suck the carbon in. But as Trevi, as the name implies, we like to use nature-based solutions for that. So trees, as they grow and as they are alive, they undergo photosynthesis, which, as we all remember from school, is where they take in carbon dioxide, they put out lots of nice oxygen, but that carbon that they draw in, they store in their sap, sort of like a timber on our stomach, really, isn't it? They store that carbon in their sap, and what you can do, if you're someone like Forest Carbon, if you're green-fingered, you can go, well, I know when that tree reaches maturity, it will store a certain amount of carbon, and that will vary from species to species around the world and things like that, but you can say that tree planted there will store a certain amount of carbon. Therefore, a whole forest of trees becomes what we call a carbon reservoir. So we can say, well, that whole forest there that wasn't there before we did our planting, that is now drawing out and storing a certain amount of carbon that's no longer in the atmosphere and has had a positive environmental impact and has balanced out emissions that have come out of the tailpipe of our vehicles. So that's how we make use of trees, and there's lots of other benefits to that as well. So forests that are planted in the UK can help with things like biodiversity, they can help, so on the Isle of Arran where we're planting at the moment, they're actually creating sort of corridors of vegetation that help the local wildlife be in the right places and sort of have that ecosystem. They can help with flood mitigation, they can help with water quality, so there's all kind of, and even employment for those that are looking after and planting the forest. So lots of benefits to planting trees. But the really key thing for us, and obviously for the Federation as well, were those trees would be protected, they're looked after, and they'll do the growing that they say they're going to do. So again, it's not just about, oh, we want to do something at the RREC, can we put a couple of trees in the garden? That's lovely. But do we know those trees are going to last? Do we know they're going to grow to the right amount? Do we know that they will capture the amount of carbon that we think they're hoping to? We don't know that, so they have to be in verified schemes. They have to be planted under the Woodland Carbon Code, and they have to be registered on the UK Land Carbon Registry. So that's why we have to go with where the planting projects are, and that's what we've been doing for the Federation. So that in a nutshell is kind of how we make use of trees. We grow them, they absorb the carbon, it balances out the emissions from our vehicles. So where have we been doing that? So when we first launched the Federation scheme, so so Tree we do our own thing. We've got some of our own customers, do some stuff with commercial places, hotels and things like that, and our own historic customers, but we also run and manage the Federation scheme. So everything you hear today will be in the context of the Federation scheme. So the Federation scheme, when we launched, we didn't know what the uptake would be, we didn't know sort of the appetite and sort of how much people would want to get involved in the scheme. So at first we were planting in a project called Tom's Wood, not named after me. We were planting a project called Tom's Wood that other companies were using as well. So it's just a communal project. We planted for the first 2 years, I think it was, in Tom's Wood. And over that time, we got sort of our stats, we got our data, and we said, we think on average we will need this many trees, this much tonnes of carbon that need dealing with each year. So when Tom's Wood was finished, so Tom's Wood was in North Yorkshire, as you can see, it planted alder, birch, wild cherry, gogler and sycamore. That's really important. You have to plant indigenous trees. They have to be the trees that are appropriate for the area, because otherwise they won't grow as well, they won't capture the right amount of carbon. And if you just boshed a load of conifers up there, they would actually be quite bad for the environment, it wouldn't help the local wildlife. So it has to be the right trees in the right place. Tom's Wood as a project was finished, they'd run out of room, they planted all the trees they needed to, and as you can see, it's kind of rewilding, it's restoring forest that's been lost over centuries, so it's sort of attached to another bit of forest that's already there, and the land has been used up. So we were offered, we're very excited to say, our own project for the Federation. So this planting season, sort of the calendar year we're now in, all of the Federation's individual users for carbon, clubs, everything that we do with the Federation is being funneled to the Isle of Arran and a planting project there. As you can see, it's a different selection of trees there. We've got a bit of hazel, we've got some Scots pine, because that's what's more suitable on the Isle of Arran. And that project, I think it might only take us a year and a half or so to sort of complete. Obviously those trees then last for ages, but you've run out of room to plant all the saplings. So what we'll look to do then is start a new project, perhaps in a different part of the country, recognising that the Federation are kind of a national organisation, have clubs everywhere. At the end we've got a bit of a video that, it was your directorial debut, wasn't it, the video? So we've got a bit of video that just sort of shows the Isle of Arran and just sort of gives you a sense of how it sort of fits in with the local environment. But again, it is part of a bigger project that is part of helping Arran's general wildlife, and not just putting a load of trees just in a car park or something like that. So, how do we make use of what we do as Treeving? We think of ourselves as the oily-fingered people. So we've done the maths on, well, that vehicle going that far will create this amount of emissions. And Forest Carbon, who then do the green-fingered maths, we go, well, we've got this many tonnes that need dealing with, what trees and where should we plant them? So how do we make use of that? How do we take advantage of the planting? So, as David's covered, there's lots of different members of the Federation founded. You've got individual people, you've got clubs, you've got traders, you've got museums. So, in terms of how we help clubs, so that can be anything. Actually, I think on the next slide I've got a few nice badges that show a few of the different clubs we've worked with. And each of them have done sort of different things. Everything we do can be quite bespoke to them. So you've got people like Club Triumphs, they've carbon captured their Borders Raiders run. So 200 cars going through the borders, a nice sort of couple 100-mile routes. They've gone, we'll capture cumulatively that amount of miles. You then got someone like the Brighton and Hove Motor Club, the Brighton Speed Trials that used to happen on the seafront. They went, well, we've got 400 runners doing 2 miles each, so let's capture those. So again, we've sort of tailored to sort of what a club's activities are and what they get up to. And right at the end, Lydia's going to come up and sort of talk a little bit about what the RAC are thinking about sustainability, and then what we're going to do for you. Because again, you're quite unique, you're the first to do this with the Federation, so a nice bit of a bespoke scheme for you guys. But then a few others to pull out, Vintage Sports Car Club, so they, as the sort of head office, they said, well, we will carbon balance the emissions from every single event that we do at the Vintage Sports Car Club, all their different speed trials, their hill climbs and things like that. They went really into the weeds of it, and they're actually doing some sort of 2 to 1, so for every tonne they emit, they do a tonne's worth of planting in the UK, and they do a tonne's worth of protecting forestry overseas. I won't get all nerdy about that, but that's just the element they've gone down. So we've done lots with clubs, we've done lots to sort of help them go to their members. We're going to do a headliner event, we're going to do a thing to make it green. We hope it inspires you to tackle your sort of on the go during the year emissions really. So that's how we help the clubs. So then we also work with all the museums that David mentioned, the traders and people like that. So again, we've gone from, you know, someone like the Dundee Museum of Transport, they say, well, we take our vehicles out of the museum between them, they do about 500 miles a year, we've carbon balanced that, all the way through to say Brooklands Museum, who said, well, we wouldn't be an organisation if all our staff didn't come in and our volunteers come in, so they carbon balanced all their commuter miles cumulatively. So again, everyone's sort of taking different approaches, and you were talking about sort of the things that Gaben's doing at the British Motor Museum. The ones that are perhaps more bigger, more commercially minded, they're thinking about it from what we're competing with non-transport museums to try and be a green tourism hotspot. What can we do to sort of thrive and survive in quite a tough climate at the moment for sort of hospitality and things like that. So again, that's how we help them and help their business be green. Genus, I'll just point to them because you mentioned archiving. So Genus are your archiving, what's their official digitalisation partner?
Yeah.
So they're a company that are working with lots of clubs to make sure you can scan all their documents and all their archives. Obviously they've got lots of vans on the road to sort of service machinery, so they've made sure what are very modern vans are green as they go about their work in the historic sector. So again, everything nicely tailored. And then finally, and this is kind of the day-to-day for what we do for the Federation, in November 21, the Federation launched a website that anyone can use to carbon balance their individual emissions for the year. So we worked with your data team from one of the 5 yearly surveys, and from that, and this also underpins the work we do with clubs and traders, we were able to go, what's the average miles per gallon for each different vehicle type that David mentioned, because you were able to get that data. Using that, we were then able to put together some different products, and so people can go online and all they need to go is then they go, I've got a classic car and I do 750 miles a year, it's that much. Or I log on, I've got a tractor, I do 300 miles a year, it's that much. And then they can carbon capture their mileage, plant some trees, but most importantly, they're doing it under this green banner that is the Federation scheme. Not only does it speak to the credibility, as David says, sort of the Federation handle the money side of it and all of that kind of things, you know, payment is to the Federation. Big credibility thing, but also everyone's doing it under the same banner. When David is talking in Westminster saying the community is doing this much, it counts for more because everyone's sort of individual voices is adding up. So that's really satisfying. That's, you know, there's hundreds of these car stickers, we change them each year, but they, you know, there's the hundreds of these car stickers out there sort of shouting. And anecdotally, we hear stories of people going, I was being shouted at on a petrol forecourt because I've got my old car out, and they go, I've got my sticker, planted a couple of trees, I'll carbon balance for miles. You know, that's certainly for the clubs as well. So we've just launched a scheme with the HRCR, and you know, their rally organisers have to letter drop everyone along the route when they're doing a big rally, and they can now say, please let us do a rally through the village because we as an organisation have balanced all the vehicles taking part. So again, it's half to help the environment, it's half to help the community and keep us sort of relevant and prospering really as we head into the 21st century. So they're the three key sort of poles really of what we get up to for the Federation. We were then having a conversation, I sort of did the spiel, I did my normal presentation, I didn't have my trusty sidekick with me. But we did this presentation, and obviously you guys have got big sustainability ideas and things about the future, but wanted to sort of tailor it for you. So, I think you just want to sort of mention, Lydia, now sort of what you're thinking, what you're getting up to, and then we'll just cover sort of what we're sort of launching today and what will be in the magazine, I think, from next month.
Absolutely. So from the club's perspective, as of yesterday, you can purchase 750 miles, or is it 50?
You've done 750 and 1500. Yeah.
So you can purchase your miles from the club shop. You will receive a bespoke car sticker for your windscreen that basically will say, in partnership with Truby and the FBHVC, you have bought through the RREC your carbon balancing for the miles that you do in your classic car for the year. So that's the first thing that we've done. The second thing that we're going to be doing for the NEC show in November is we will be carbon balancing everyone going to that event. So not only the cars that are coming in terms of classic cars to be displayed, but we, the club, will offset all of the team's mileage as well. So that means that for us, the NEC show in November will be a pretty green event. We will absolutely offset all of the carbon that we as a club will put into that show through Trevi's help. There are various ways that we would like the club to start looking at this. So Paula's earlier this week did a road run, and that's the kind of ideal event that we could be carbon balancing as well. They're fantastic events. We know that our members love a drive it day, but it wouldn't cost a huge amount of money to offset that. So that's one way that we're looking at doing it. Similarly, the register rallies, we will be looking to try and entice the registers to offset some of their travel as well. And there are other things that we can do moving forward. So if the club really does embrace this scheme, we can look at offsetting things like the Southern Rally, the North of England Rally, and the annual rally as well. So there are lots of things in here that are really enticing as a club as to how we can move forward. And not only that, from a perspective of younger members, this will be something that we hope that they'll be really interested in and will make them feel like this club really looks at their future and the longevity of the club and entices them to come and join us as well. So lots of good things.
Lots of questions. Do we start?
Yeah, but I think all of them are great, and I think you mentioned NEC. It's about tackling what's in your control. You can't control how the NEC lights that exhibition hall or powers the kitchen at the cafe, but the bit you're in control of, you will have tackled, and that's the message for you to shout about.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Going back to
yeah, I was going to say, I think the next thing is just questions. So yeah, let's crack on questions.
Because first of all, it's like the offsetting. I just want to understand more about that. So yes, you've got a scheme going on. That has to factor time in. So the carbon's only offset if they're there for 35. Is there a time scale? How long they have to be there?
We're about to get very nerdy on this. This is very.
I was a data analyst.
No, I love it. So I mentioned carbon balancing. That's the overall term for using trees to get carbon out of the atmosphere and tackle it. So within carbon balancing, there's two ways of going about it. One's carbon offsetting, which is probably a term a lot of people know. It's the one that's in the media, and there's carbon capture. So carbon offsetting is where you protect forest that's already done that capturing. You're making sure it's not burnt down to create land for grazing and doesn't release that carbon back into the atmosphere. That's carbon offsetting. As trees have done their storing, that's really good for commercial things. So when we do work with hotels and companies, they want to do the carbon offsetting because it's already been tackled. As you say, it's not over long term, it's been dealt with. They can talk about the term carbon offsetting in their PR, it's lovely. Carbon capture, you're right, it is a slower process. Yeah, the carbon will be captured sort of in the first 10 to 15 years of the tree's life, you know, like all of us, you do most of you grow in early doors, it will be captured during that time. So what we do is technically we're planting saplings that are pending carbon credits, that every sort of couple of years Forest Carbon will go in, they'll do the verification process, they'll say, right, these are now verified carbon credits because a certain amount of carbon has been captured. It is, you use the word slow burn when you talk about trees really. It's a slower burn project, but the beauty of it is we can do it in the UK.
And the fact is with the scheme, it protects them so they
exactly.
won't
Printed under UK.
chop down until it's actually
again, very nerdy.
Most important.
That is
Yeah.
most important.
Get very nerdy again. There are felling projects, so that is where trees are grown, and obviously the trees chopped down and used to make wooden furniture, like those benches are still technically carbon captured. They're still medieval building in Stratford is technically storing carbon from medieval times. So there's felling projects where the trees are planted, chopped down, replaced. They're very good, and I think they're fine from a sustainability point of view. But what we're doing here for the Federation is doing non-felling projects. The trees are planted, they create a legacy as well. And eventually, as much as we've got the Federation Forest on the Isle of Arran, which is a lovely little project that is just the Federation stuff, one day my neighbour's ambition is to have a nice big forest. Central England, massive forest, you know, all of these trees, as far as the eye can see, are because of Federation members. So yeah, it is a slower process, it has to take planting the time for the plants to grow, but that I think is sort of the right
Perfect. Answers that, and then the next one goes over there. It's like, okay, I've got no idea of the cost to me to do that.
Absolutely.
As to if I drive 3,000 miles a year in a 4.5 litre Silver Wraith, you know, what is my responsibility?
So the 750 miles will cost you £20 and the 1,500 miles will cost you 30.
But that's against what? Depends on whether you've got a V8.
So this is where, see again, yeah, so this is what discussion we had when we started the Federation scheme. We could get really into the weeds, we could build, you know, we can do the maths based on exactly how many litres of fuel you use a year and things like that. That doesn't make the scheme accessible. That doesn't get people on board to make a statement and have some green impact. So hence why we use the average, which I think is for classic cars, 25 miles to the gallon. Is kind of
So
the
it's
data
for
federation.
an average classic car.
Yeah.
Obviously for our cars I'm getting 13 or 15 miles to the gallon.
But equally,
If you're lucky.
It's out
you
there.
know, I've come this morning in a 4.2 litre Range Rover. You know, all I do is I buy more offset balancing than I would if I'd have come in a Mini, because I just recognise I need to do the honest thing in recognising I'm using more fuel than.
But I like, and personally I like the, sorry, I like the individuals. I can take individual responsibility rather than enforcing it on my members. I just did a run. If I'd have started saying today it's going to be another £5 each, then I'd have grumbling members, wouldn't I? Would you grumble? Probably. So I like the individual idea that I can do it, but also if I'm going to do it, I want to do it right. So it's like I want to make sure that 750 miles is for what I actually do.
Yeah, and I think this is all about transparency, and we've had these conversations right from the beginning, you know, because we've had clubs approach us, and I won't name them, but in the early days they came to us and said, oh well, there's a brilliant tree planting program on Madagascar.
Yeah.
And it's half the price. And as I said, I used to do a global job, so I tend to watch global news broadcasts because I'm interested in what's happening around the world, not necessarily in Towcester or Northampton. And what was interesting was when we'd been told by this club about this program in Madagascar, and it was 7 cents. Within about 3 days, BBC reported on tornadoes that had cleared everything on Madagascar. And so then of course you do the Google thing, how often is Madagascar hit by tornadoes? Well that's the storm season, and that happens every year. And whereas with forest carbon, the government, and it is UK government scheme, are actually verifying that these trees are still in place and they're still doing their job. You know, that's why our due diligence took so long.
And the UK government subsidised the planting because we in effect, we buy tonnage of carbon and it's a price point per tonne. That is actually subsidised by the government because they want the tree planting to happen. So they are invested themselves in making sure.
And then people talk about the tons. The other thing, I have no concept of driving a Rolls Royce for a year. What I do, having tons of things that is.
No, but that's why we've got Tom.
Yeah.
Because if the club actually said to you, well, okay, we know that our vehicles are going to generate more carbon than the norm, then Tom will be able to advise us on that. And that's the important thing. That's why Tom's in the middle of this. Because if we went to Forest Carbon and said that,
they won't do the maths for you. They go, just tell us how many trees you need.
And we'll dig holes and plant the trees. And that's why we introduced Treevee into the equation to make it viable.
And then your pricing for the speakers for us, I guess, is averaging that out to be reasonable for what we do.
Absolutely.
And as you say, there's a video that says sort of like this is hopefully the start of lots of nice schemes. And if you find there's a lot of appetite, but a lot of people are going, yeah, for, I reckon I get 10 to the gallon and things, then for you guys, we can just change change the
So you
maths.
say it's 20 quid for like that 750, and
Yeah.
you've got another one you said?
£30 for 1500.
But you know, if I send Tom a cheque for £50, well, that's covered me riding around in a car with 4.2 litre engine, because I actually enjoy doing that. You know, as you gentlemen enjoy driving your Rolls Royce or Bentley.
We can actually put different price points on the website if you want to do 6,000 or 12,000. You know, we can just add those up and choose, yeah.
It's flexible, and it's your scheme. It's not a.
But that's why the stickers there, because if I go to a lot of, we do a lot of events, and if you just got something stuck in there, people can see you are offsetting that.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not offsetting, so you're capturing.
Yeah, you're balancing. The key words, the two ones are carbon balancing.
Yeah.
Those are the key.
I think that's the one that the public understand the best. If you're being criticised or someone saying why you can't out there, go miles of
I
carbon.
mean, a standard answer is sort of like, yeah, but the carbon footprint of making my car is still there 70 years later, being utilised, so it's not being thrown away.
Exactly. We say it's the ultimate upcycling. You know, upcycling is very fashionable at the minute. I think is dealing with the tailpipe emissions is part of the story. It's part of going, I've got an old car on the road, but I've kept it going. I've repaired parts. I've used new parts that are produced in the UK, so therefore the carbon footprint of them being made is low. All those different things add up. You've got a great story to tell, but then everyone goes, yeah, but look at what's coming out of the exhaust. But you go, well, I've dealt with that as well. It's a pretty, I always say, like, our Morris Vine is the greenest car on our street, because it's old and it's carbon balanced.
Yeah.
The Arrow project you mentioned, what is the cost of actually initiating that? And then you mentioned about subsequent maintenance. Any ideas?
So in terms of the project itself,
Who actually pays for that?
yeah, so the whole project, as I say, there's a lot going on Isle of Arran at the moment. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's like the Arran environmental, it's all sort of along around the edges of the island, like sort of the southern side of the island. So there's loads going on that other sort of, you know, Scottish government, people are doing lots of things there. This is a particular project where someone with a parcel of land will approach Forest Carbon saying, oh, we've got some land, I want to do some trees, can we do a verified programme? So that's where Forest Carbon get involved. So that's kind of the start point of that project. So Forest Carbon will then go in, they'll look at the piece of land and go, well, in this climate we're going to have to plant Scots pine, hazel, things like that. You could fit that many on here, and then that's when they sense of how many trees can be planted. So that's kind of sort of the scoping of the project. And then, as I say, we purchase what we need in sort of tonnage, and then that price of that tonnage also includes Forest Carbon's element to go back and check the programme to register on the UK Land Carbon Registry, and for that to be processed. As I said, that is subsidised by the government, because that's one of the levers they're pulling to make sure planting is done. So I don't think there's a, oh, it costs X amount to launch the project. It is about sort of purchasing it as you need it to go. What we do find is, you know, because the tree planting seasons is quite a small window, Forest Carbon will often plant the saplings when it's the right time to, and then in effect we adopt the saplings off them, and then they're in our name.
Yeah, so I think the other important thing is that, you know, because the planting is cyclical, we sometimes will forward buy trees. So, funny enough, we were talking before we started this morning. Our financial year, the new one starts 1st of June, and I've said to Tom this morning that once we get into the financial year, I'm actually quite happy for the Federation to forward buy some trees, because, you know, in June they're not going to be planting, because we need to get to October event before that happens. So we do things like that we advance purchase.
We lock the prices in as well, which is really nice, and it sort of shows our intent to Forest Carbon. I said we've had a big journey of proving ourselves as a community that we want to do things like that.
To be honest, I was quite surprised how cautious Forest Carbon were of taking the Federation on.
Good.
We did have to prove ourselves.
Yeah, definitely.
And
They work with big corporations. They work with everyone from Microsoft to Nationwide to Utility Warehouse and big sort of energy companies in that sense. But they were like, oh, classic car. They sort of passed our head a little bit, like, oh, that's a nice idea. We went,
Yeah.
who really do that? And here we are, well, probably about 6 million miles later,
yes,
cumulatively across the Federation.
and it was about a year in when they said to you and you said to me, you know, Forest Carbon, they're really impressed by you. They're surprised how much, because the payments for trees go through our bank account. It's a separate account, and then it's audited monthly. And I know there's a payment on the system which I've got to authorise, but it's simply our bookkeeper verifies that the money's come in, and then you invoice us, and we pay for it. So it's absolutely simple scheme, because I like simple things, and it works well.
And that's how it will work for the RAC. You'll take the payment to the club shop, everything through your bank account, and then we will say to Lydia how many people have bought stickers this month, this quarter, however often we report in. We'll say how many stickers, and then we'll invoice you in the same way. So again, everything's sort of through the credible, known systems that you all
So
know.
how much money do you get?
So we do have a small admin
Does the government take a bit of it?
off that sort of £20 or £30. So for example,
Yeah.
so no, the government don't get any of that £20 or £30, and they
So no one
subsidise.
else gets any?
So
it
we-
goes straight
Well,
to
I get an admin.
Well, we'll get an admin fee because we have to
Yeah.
run our company, pay for the stickers and things like that. Because we're not a charity, we are a business, which gives us a bit more freedom. So we have our admin element to it, and you'll need a little bit of an admin element for the postage and packaging and things like that. But yeah, the point the government's involved is right at that first bit where they're making that price per tonnage cheaper. So we don't, none of that 20 or 30 goes to the government.
So I think we're fortunate because this is relatively small scale. So if you look at what we're doing with Childline, you know, I've been to their head office in East London, and that obviously has costs and whatever. We don't, the Federation does not make any money out of this activity at all, because what we want to do is offer our members a solution, nothing more than that. So where we pay, if you need envelopes, obviously we've got to pay for envelopes, but
And the point has to be that the £20 covers the right offsetting.
Yeah.
We
After your costs have been
average,
taken out.
we average about 80 to 85% goes on planting and trees, which is what the Woodland Trust
Yeah.
also
And that
average.
is enough to offset the carbon.
Yes.
Appropriate or capture the carbon.
Tom,
Yes, sir.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go for it.
I noticed on the planting schemes you've got, while I did see oak, I did see a lot of very quick-growing, short-lived trees on the list. What's the process on that?
So as I say, they'll choose the right trees for the right area, and that's why you have different plants in different parts of the UK. We do want quick growing because we want to do that capturing as quickly as possible. But yeah, in terms of what trees are planted, they're then protected. So you know, they also plant a buffer. I didn't mention the buffer. So they plant a buffer. So if there is a bit of, you know, not everything grows to the rate you expect, you've got that extra bit planted as well. So that makes sure the growing is done and the capturing is done. In terms of the life of the trees, yes, all trees will die. We know that. What will happen then, part of the natural part of the ecosystem, is once they die, they've already helped foster. This is why it's right to use indigenous trees. They've helped the other plants grow underneath, and they've helped other things. This isn't just about planting the original 100 trees. It's about creating forest and woodland. So those trees die down. Yes, a little bit of carbon gets released as they rot, but ultimately they go back into the ecosystem. Their carbon, their mulch, will help other trees grow. So yeah, ideally, yes, you plant trees that have a 200-year lifespan that do all their capturing in the first 5 years, but you just have to sort of find the right balance of what tree to grow in the right place to then create a sort of more woodland on
I
that
did see
project.
some slow-growing, long-lived trees.
Yeah,
like
so
that.
that's why they do a bit of sort of, it's not just rows in that sense, but yeah, it's not just one bulk of or custody issue.
It can't take 100 years to capture your one time.
Yeah.
It's got to do it quicker. Isn't
Yeah,
it?
and that's why they like to, if they can, they like to do the projects as kind of rewilding projects next to existing woodland, because you sort of get that green creep that sort of creates a much bigger sort of carbon reservoir.
And Tom's Wood,
Yeah.
the aerial shots of Tom's Wood are quite good with that,
Yeah, you can see
because
sort of the old
they're very
pictures.
often infill projects. And it's interesting actually, because my wife was telling me earlier this week that there is a scheme, and I must talk to you about it, where there's a government scheme now that if you've got a certain amount of land, then you can participate in these schemes. And we've got a paddock that actually is on a slope. It's waterlogged, and actually we can't ever do anything with it. And we have thought, well, maybe we'll put that over, and that's part of government scheme.
Yeah, so it can make sure it's verified. And I think that you often see in the news like these horror stories. You know, they built a new motorway and they've put a load of trees in there on the banking, and then they've all died. It's because that's not a verified scheme. Who's looking after them after the highways agency have moved on? Or you hear about some big American company buys a field in Wales and puts conifers up that doesn't do anything, and that's a mess. That's greenwashing in that case. What we're doing and what that scheme, by the sounds of it, is making sure the right trees are in the right place, being looked after.
Yeah. So it goes back to what I said right at the beginning, this due diligence thing. Complete nightmare. And we did, some of the planting schemes I visited right at the beginning, it was someone's passion that he wanted to plant, 20 acres of tree. And when you actually challenged him and said, well, if you're not here next year, what happens? Oh, well, nothing. And that's why our schemes, as part of what Forest Carbon do, are registered with UK Land Registry. And
So who owns the land then?
So there is a landowner.
There's a landowner.
So they're the ones that are then under UK law duty bound to protect
If they
it.
sold the land, it would be under some covenant with
Yeah,
the new
exactly.
owners. So yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Funnily enough, something we were talking about again earlier is that I won't say who it is, but we have a federation partner who has quite a lot of land. And I know they've said to us, oh, well, maybe we should be party to this. And we're not going down that route because I don't believe there would be the degree of control that we've got with Forest Carbon, because I think you'd start to get into the commercial consideration of that organisation and we'd lose control of that. Whereas this is dead easy because we say, please plant this number of trees, Forest Carbon invoice, you invoice us, and it's transparent and it's simple.
And I think we've used the term a lot, plant some trees, it's the one everyone understands, but the beauty of Forest Carbon is we actually deal in tonnage. So the person you met right at the start of your due diligence, loads of acres and going to plant some trees, great. What do those trees mean?
Yeah.
I think that's key. And also it's key for us because, as I say, we've got Morris Minor, we're also here to help sort of keep the historic sort of community on the road. We have to quantify it, so being able to deal in terms of tonnes rather than number of trees. We always put a number of trees on it so people can visualise and understand, but it's about...
Yeah, that's right. Well, if I think back to that one particular North Yorkshire forest that I tromped around, it had been quite windy and there was quite a lot of windfall damage. And so then you say, well, what about all these that have fallen over? Well, yeah, I've got to get round to going and doing the maintenance. And whereas with Forest Carbon, then it's a business to them and they just deal with it.
That might be all the tree questions anyone has.
Any other questions?
David,
Yes, Clive.
we've talked about clubs But you haven't mentioned, at least I didn't hear it, that you would have individual members of the federation.
Yes, indeed. And, you know, increasingly there are individual members of the federation. So we've got 4 categories of membership. Clubs is the big one for obvious reasons. Museums has become number 2. But certainly individual members are a fundamental part of the Federation's contact. Actually, we've got lots of individual members who say, well, I don't want to wait for the newsletter to percolate through the system. I'd like to have my own when it's published and read. So yes, very much, Clive, very much an important part of what we do.
I've always noticed you have a lot of individual members turn up at like the AGMs and extras. I've always been impressed by how many.
Oh
So,
yeah.
They're always questioning me about trees.
We
But,
can
yeah,
end up with quite a, you know, our attendance list for the AGM. There's an awful lot of people on who are there as individual members. You're quite right.
I am as well.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
You mentioned the Federation, I think you said about research every 5 years, was it?
Yeah.
Why is it just 5 years and not less?
Because it's such a massive task,
Is
and it's a very expensive process.
Is it?
If you want to do a research program of the quality we do,
Right.
that is viable to government, you couldn't look at our accounts and actually see it as so, but it's in the accounts. The last programme cost us £44,000.
Really?
Yeah. Research is
I know I
very
participated in those
expensive.
questions
Yeah,
for it,
yeah. So that's why it's every 5 years. We got it in a bit of a tangle because of COVID. You know, if you actually look at the data we give government, that goes back to 1997. And government likes it because it's traceable from that point every 5 years. And then we did research in 2011, research in 2016. We did a midterm research in sort of 2019, and then COVID hit. And then you think, because there's a lead time, because if you're going to report how much you spend on your historical classic vehicle motoring in the previous year, you've got a delay of a year there. So what we did was we did an interim report 2020 because we were able to base that on 2019 data, and we're just about to announce that in the next programme, because the 2020 report was actually, if you look on the website, it's there and you'll see it's 2020/2021. So we're adding 5 years on that, so 2026 there we go. Very expensive, and you have to negotiate quite hard to get research for 44 grand. I can.
So Tom, do you get landowners to volunteer their land, or do you buy the land, or how do you acquire it?
So we don't acquire it. We as Tree don't acquire it. Forest Carbon don't acquire it. Landowners approach Forest Carbon and say they would like to do a verified project, and then Forest Carbon have a relationship with the landowner to help make sure the planting's done correctly. Then they have a relationship with the customer, such as ourselves or say Nationwide or whoever, or the company might want to use Forest Carbon's planting services, if you will. So that's it's sort of a bit of a Chinese wall. So say we were ever to do something with a Federation member, they would have a relationship with Forest Carbon as the landowner, still owning the land, they'll have to buy it. And then we would say, but can we just sort of funnel all the planting that we need doing to the one that Forest Carbon and that person is sort of
So
semi
Forest Carbon,
hosting.
the landowner have the agreement then?
Your Forest Carbon and landowner have the agreements, yes.
Yeah.
So, but in effect,
And landowners can offer, or they can, yeah, that's.
they in effect they're hosting the forest, I suppose, on their land. That's a nice way.
And then Forest Carbon will accredit it, so make
To
sure that
accredit
it's
it
going to
to us,
be,
yeah.
it's going to be protected for the minimum number of
Yeah.
years for the scheme.
That's right. Remember that as far as landowners are concerned, they're probably under pressure from government, from DEFRA, actually to make the land available for various projects. That
And
might
there's
be.
subsidies involved. Again, part of the levers government pulling, not only do they make it cheaper for us to buy carbon than it probably should be, they'll also be incentivising the landowners to host said forests. So, there's got to be something in for them to have their land taken up by those trees. So that's kind of how the economy of it works.
So this is where you've got, next to where I live, there's one field, it's a big field, it's 84 acres. And the farmer lives next to me, and they get all sorts of pressures over that amount of land in terms of offsetting programs to support the green
The
agenda.
green strategy,
I farm, but we are finding it increasingly difficult to be able to grow food for people to eat now.
Yeah, I know.
Because of all the environmental schemes.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a bit of our land.
Yeah.
Build houses on or what have you.
No, well that's the answer to your question. Yeah, but actually, growing wheat or growing potatoes.
It's the last thing people are thinking of today.
Right, no, I'm living in a farming community.
Yeah, it's a job to marry up the two. When are we going to be short of food to feed a nation?
Yeah.
Because it would bring a government down if we ran out of food.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's why a lot of the projects we work on are sort of rewilding lost woodland, repairing lost and damaged woodland. So you're sort of trying to keep it in what was previously wooded areas and not just random.
And that's where the Forest Carbon Company comes in, because if I'm investing, I want to make sure that in a changing government they don't say, okay, well, no, we want that back to food again. Whereas no, I've committed them to that, and that's got to be 35 years.
And that's why they tend to be infill sites.
Yeah.
Like the Tom's Wood pictures you've got there. It's a little block of land that, with Tom's Wood, they planted 28,000 trees on that scheme, but it's just infill. It's not my 84 acre field that's the other side of the hedge to my house, where the farmers are actually planting crops in that as a result.
Is there a ballpark, like a classic car used for a year, how many trees one has to end up planting?
Yeah.
Probably about a couple of trees.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, it's not too much.
Yeah.
Your points of tons really. That's the beauty of running a scheme like this, because we are able through Swan and the federations, people can buy exactly the percent of the ton they need, which again
So
keeps
you
prices
buy
down.
forest for every car.
Exactly, keeps prices down, keeps people engaged, and hopefully gets people signing up because it's at that price.
So a couple of trees more or less covers a classic car.
Depending on what, ballpark sort of miles, that's sort of what we look at.
Per year. we're talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah.
Yeah.
Per year.
2 new trees a year or 2 trees growing, continually growing.
So you plant that for this year's emissions. I need to plant 2 trees, and while they grow,
For
as they
35
grow over
years.
their
For every year,
lifetime,
2 trees.
Two
Yeah.
trees.
That's
Not the same 2 trees.
No.
Yeah, so
Unless
you're
you're
offsetting with
subscribing.
35 years growth of 2 trees for this year's alone.
Yes.
That's
And how much would 2 trees cost?
So again, we talk about in terms of the miles, that makes it the most applicable. So sort of a couple of trees, that £30 mark, that was the 1,500 miles we did for you, isn't it? I'd say sort of an average classic does 1,500 a year, £30, that's the sort of 2 trees or so.
So it all relates back to the same sum, basically.
Any particular tree.
It'll be what's right for that project. So we don't say, David, you've bought your 2 trees, we're going to do 2 Scots pines for you, but Lydia, we're going to do 2 hazels. It's not like that, it's what's needed in that project.
And I used to do stuff with motorsport many years ago, and so used to have quite a lot of dealings with Forestry Commission. And when Forestry Commission take you into a forest and talk to you about their planting schemes, it's a totally different environment to what we're talking about. You know, one of the trees we planted was goat willow, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And that's all part and parcel of
Interesting.
how it looks. Okay.
I was going to say, thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for the questions.
That was